The show was over. The audience had gone. The band had packed up. The dressing rooms were emptying out in the slow, dispersed way that dressing rooms empty after a successful night. People moving with the specific lightness of people who have done something well and know it. Tom Jones was still in his dressing room when Sammy Davis Jr. came in. It was Las Vegas. It was the late 1960s or early 1970s. Sammy Davis Jr. had been in the audience that night, and he had come backstage not to leave pleasantries, but to talk. He was like that. He was a man who found the social convention of the pleasantries somewhat insufficient. When he saw something that interested him, he wanted to engage with it directly. He sat down across from Tom Jones, and after a moment, he asked him something. The question was not about the performance. It was not about the voice. It was not about the songs, or the staging, or the audience reaction. It was more specific than any of those things, and more personal, and it cut closer to something that Tom Jones had not yet found the language to address. Sammy Davis Jr. asked Tom Jones what he thought he was, not as a performer, not as a celebrity, as an artist. What he believed he was trying to do, what he thought his music was actually for. Tom Jones did not have an answer. Sammy Davis Jr. was one of the most extraordinary talents that Las Vegas had ever seen. He was a singer, a dancer, a drummer, a multi-instrumentalist, a comedian, an actor. He had been performing since childhood, literally since childhood, since before he understood that what he was doing was exceptional. He had grown up on the stage, and the stage had formed him as completely as any school or home or family could form a person. He was inseparable from his art in a way that few performers are. He had performed through segregation and hostility, and the specific cruelties that the entertainment industry reserved for black performers in the mid-20th century. He had performed through the loss of an eye in a car accident in 1954. He had come back from that loss and continued performing at a level that required abilities most people could not imagine. He was also one of the most perceptive people in Las Vegas. He saw things. He heard things. He understood performance at a level that came from having spent his entire life inside it, from having examined it from every angle, from having given more of himself to it than most human beings give to anything. When Sammy Davis Jr. asked you a question about your art, it was not a casual question. It was a question that had been thought about, a question that came from having watched you closely. Tom Jones understood this. He had performed in Las Vegas long enough to know what Sammy Davis Jr. represented, not just as a name, but as a mind. He knew that the question was a real question. He just did not have a real answer. The answer came slowly, not in a single moment, not in a revelation. It did not arrive the way moments in movies arrive, with music and sudden clarity. It came the way understanding usually comes to working artists, gradually, through the accumulation of specific moments of clarity during performances, through the experience of singing certain songs in certain rooms and feeling something land in a way that you suddenly understood. There would be a night when a song connected with an audience in a way that felt different from the usual connection, when the response was not just enthusiasm, but something deeper, recognition, gratitude, the feeling of having been given something that was genuinely needed. Tom Jones would feel these moments. He was attuned to them, and each one added something to the answer that Sammy Davis Jr. had asked him to find. Tom Jones began to understand what his music was for. It was for the moment of contact, not just the technical event of sound reaching an audience. Something more specific than that. The moment when the person listening felt, through the music, something that they had not been able to feel on their own. Something about their own lives, about the people they had loved, about the experiences that had shaped them and that they did not normally have words for. Tom Jones had been doing this his entire career. He had always been good at it. But he had done it instinctively, without understanding it fully. The understanding was what Sammy Davis Jr. had been asking about. He found the answer, not at a specific moment he could point to, but sometime in the 1970s, in the middle of a long and extraordinarily productive career, Tom Jones arrived at a clear sense of his purpose as an artist that he had not had in the late 1960s when the question was first asked. The clarity did not make him a different performer. He was already extraordinary. What it gave him was a different relationship to his own work. A quieter, more grounded certainty about what he was doing in that room every night, and why. A sense of meaning that went underneath the commercial success and the Las Vegas spectacle and the image that the world had constructed around him. He could carry the image and the artist at the same time. He could be both. Because now he understood clearly which one was the center and which one was the frame. He was a singer who gave people back to themselves. He was a voice that created, in the act of performance, a space where the audience could feel what they needed to feel. The joy, the desire, the nostalgia, the connection to their own past, whatever it was that the music unlocked for them. He was not there to demonstrate his own talent. He was there to use that talent in the service of something larger than the performance itself. This understanding showed in his work, not in any single obvious way, but in the quality of attention he brought to the music, in the way he chose songs, in the way he gave himself fully to performances that, commercially and technically, he could have coasted through. He did not coast. He had never coasted. But now he knew why. The question stayed with him. Tom Jones walked out of that dressing room carrying something he had not walked in carrying. Not a burden, something more interesting than a burden. A question that was alive in him. A question that had opened something that he did not quite have the tools to close yet. Not in the way that uncomfortable questions stay with you, nagging, irritating, demanding to be pushed aside. It stayed in the way that the right question stays with you. The question that finds the thing you have not been able to articulate and names it, even if it names it as an absence. Tom Jones thought about it on and off for years. Not obsessively, not with great visible effort, but it was there. In quiet moments between shows, in the hours before a performance when the mind moves over the territory it knows best and sometimes finds things it did not know were there. The question was there. He was not able to answer it for a long time, not because the question was unanswerable, but because the thing it was asking for was still being formed. He was still becoming the artist he would eventually be. He had the voice, had always had the voice. But the question was not about the voice. It was about what the voice was in service of, what the music was for, what he was trying to give people when he stood at a microphone. Tom Jones in the late 1960s was one of the biggest draws in Las Vegas. He was globally famous. He had the television show, the hit records, the sellout residencies. He had "This is Tom Jones" broadcasting to millions. He had audiences in 5 countries who knew his voice and his name. He had the full weight of commercial success sitting on his career. Everything a performer could want was present. By any external measure, the question of what he was had already been answered. He was one of the biggest entertainers in the world. And yet, Sammy Davis Jr. question had found something that was not fully answered by any of it. The question had pointed at a gap between what Tom Jones was doing and what he understood about why he was doing it. This is not unusual for great performers in the middle of great careers. The doing and the understanding often come apart. You are busy doing. The understanding catches up later, if you are paying attention, and if someone asks you the right question. Sammy Davis Jr. had asked the right question at exactly the right time. Sammy Davis Jr. died in May 1990. Tom Jones had known him for more than 2 decades by then. They had shared Las Vegas, shared the same venues, moved in the same world of extraordinary talent and high professional demand. In the years after Sammy Davis Jr. death, Tom Jones spoke about him in various interviews. He spoke about the talent. He spoke about the presence. He spoke about the particular quality of Sammy Davis Jr. mind, the sharpness, the directness, the refusal to be satisfied with anything less than complete engagement. He may or may not have spoken about the question that had been asked in a dressing room in Las Vegas. These things sometimes remain private, the specific exchanges that changed something in you, the moments of understanding that arrived through someone else's words and stayed with you long after the person who said them was gone. But the question is there in the record, implicit in everything Tom Jones did in the decades that followed, in the way his career continued to grow and deepen even when the commercial environment was indifferent, in the way he made Reload at 58 and found something genuine and new, in the way the voice continued to carry not just power, but meaning, the specific meaning that comes from an artist who knows what they are doing and why. Sammy Davis Jr. had asked a question. Tom Jones had taken 10 years to find the answer. But when he found it, it was in everything he did. You could hear it. You can still hear it. In the way the voice gives, not just sings. In the way a Tom Jones performance is never only about Tom Jones. It is about what the music was always for, about what it gives back to the people who needed it without knowing they needed it. Sammy Davis Jr. knew this about music. He had known it his whole life. Tom Jones needed a decade to understand it for himself. That is not a failure. That is what it means to be honest about the distance between talent and understanding, and what it means to close that distance slowly, through work, through years of singing, through the experience of rooms going quiet and people leaning forward, and the voice finding what was needed and giving it. The question was asked in a Las Vegas dressing room sometime in the late 1960s or early 1970s. A man who had spent his entire life in performance sat down with another man who had spent his entire life in performance and asked him something that cut through everything and reached the thing underneath. Tom Jones could not answer. Not that night. Not because he was unprepared or unwilling, but because the answer was not yet available to him. It was still being made. A question like that is a gift. It does not feel like a gift when it is asked. It feels like a challenge or a gap or a moment of quiet exposure. But over time, over 10 years in this case, It becomes the question that organized everything. Sammy Davis Jr. gave Tom Jones that question. Tom Jones carried it. The answer was given in everything that followed, in every performance where the voice gave back more than it received, in every room that went quiet, not because of spectacle, but because of genuine contact between a singer and the people who needed to hear him. In every decade of work that refused to be only about fame or image or the external machinery of success. The question and the answer are both still audible. Every time the voice rises to a note that asks for everything, they are there. A dressing room in Las Vegas. A question that needed 10 years, and the answer that turned out to be a life's work.